Thank you, everyone. We're going to wait just another minute or two to allow everyone to join before getting started. Welcome, everyone. I'm happy to welcome you to the first meeting of the Cradle-to-Career Task Force, where we're discussing eTranscript California and the Career Passport. So grateful to all of you for being here. Before we dive in, let me just do a quick check with the team. Are we at critical mass to get going?
Yes, we are.
Okay, we'll get started then. Well, many thanks to all the members of the task force who are here with us, to our presenters today who will be sharing with us, and to our members of the public who are dialing in. We're really delighted to have you here and excited that you're engaging with us on this work. I'm Marianne Bates. I'm the Executive Director of the Cradle-to-Career Data System, and we're excited to kick off what will be a series of 6 task force meetings once a month. And we'll start by walking through a high-level overview of what we're going to cover in today's agenda, and then walk through each of these one by one. So we're delighted we'll have a presentation by the Governor's Office today on how eTranscript California and a career passport fit within the new master plan on career education. So we'll be hearing from the Governor's Office. We'll have a presentation from WestEd on the specific use cases and background research that WestEd has done at our request on these topics. We'll have a presentation from the California Community College's Chancellor's Office on the proposed strategy for scaling eTranscript California and the issues that would need to be addressed separately for a career passport. We're going to welcome public comment towards the end. So after we've had those presentations, task force members, after each presentation, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions and have a discussion amongst yourselves as a task force. And then towards the end, as I mentioned, we'll have a moment for public comment, and then we'll conclude with a group discussion on key issues to take under consideration for potential solutions. So today's meeting really helps lay a roadmap for our work together. And over the next series of meetings, we'll be addressing specific solutions that could be advanced by individual agencies and recommended for inclusion in the Career Education Master Plan. So just to give you a big picture sense of where we're going, today's meeting in January is to kick everything off at a high level. And then in February, we'll dive into the topics of dual enrollment and application integration, and March, advising tools, April, credit for prior learning, May, competency-based education and related items. And then June will be the moment to wrap all of these up into potential recommendations for the master plan. And in each one of these sessions, we'll feature external experts who can provide information about potential solutions and opportunities for task force members to showcase the efforts their organizations are leading to advance these solutions. Members of the task force, we have quite a few members who are engaging in this. I want to highlight a few things. So big picture, the members of this task force reflect the same entities who are helping to inform the Career Education Master Plan in response to Governor Newsom's executive order. So importantly, we'll have all of these partners. I'm also delighted that we're joined by a student who can help to ground our thinking as well. We'll also have several resource people who will be joining us, and that you as task force members can tap them and ask them questions as well. So this includes Mary Aguayo from the California College Guidance Initiative, or CCGI, which hosts californiacolleges.edu. We have Mark Cohen from the Community College Tech Center, which manages eTranscript California. And we have Samuel Lee from the Chancellor's Office Mapping Articulated Pathways project as well. So we're delighted that their expertise will be able to inform your work as well. Members of the public, if you're listening in, thank you. Thank you for spending your scarce time to be on this journey here with us. We want to hear your thoughts. So as I mentioned, towards the end of the meeting, we'll have public comment. We'll expect that you can speak for 2 minutes, and you can use the Zoom functions to raise your hand if you're interested in speaking. If we have a high number of commenters, we may need to reduce speaking time to 1 minute. As another option, you can use the Q&A function to pose questions. Our team may not be able to get to all questions in today's meeting, but we'll try. But please feel free to still submit your questions, because those questions can help inform the content and conversation for future meetings. So as I mentioned again, public comment towards the end of the meeting. Okay, with that, let's dive right into the main content for the meeting. To start, I'm happy to introduce my colleague, Ryan Estrellado. If we can go to the next slide, please. He's our Director of Data Programs here at Cradle-to-Career, and he's going to start by providing an overview of how eTranscript California and C2C are connected, and highlight some themes that we've heard from students as well. So over to Ryan.
Thank you, Marianne. Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Ryan Estrellado. I'm the Director of Data Programs at the Office of Cradle-to-Career Data, and I'd like to share the context for our focus on transcripts today. I hope that this context is helpful as we welcome you, our newest teammates, in this process. Now, before we go to the next slide, as I share, I want to invite you to reflect on a question. That question is, what are your own personal and professional connections to this challenge of improving how transcripts work for our students? And I think that's a question that I'm hoping will help all of us find some connection to this work in a way that is both collective, but also meaningful to us as individuals. So with that, we can go to the next slide to start the background. The office's connection to eTranscript has evolved since it was first introduced during the planning process that led to the start of our office. The story starts in 2019, when the legislation for the Cradle-to-Career data system required that the data system transmit high school transcripts. And since then, we've seen two events that were important for defining CTC's partnership with eTranscript as we see it today. The first of those events happened when the CTC Planning Work Group recommended expanding the transcript work to include new components, specifically to include not just high school students, but the experience also of college students, and also including not just academic records, but including non-academic records. The work group identified scaling eTranscript, which is housed at the Community College Chancellor's Office, as a vehicle for the expanded strategy. That was the first one. The second of these pivotal events happened at a CTC governing board meeting in August of last year, where the office recommended starting this task force to define how to scale this new vision of transcript functionality, including an exploration of the career passport concept, which we'll hear more about in the next section. So those are some of the policy stories behind C2C's partnership with eTranscript. But what does it look like from the student's point of view? To answer that question, I will now share 3 excerpts from student stories shared with us during our annual student experience audit, which is a study that we do every year to uncover the barriers that students face when applying to college. Next slide, please. Okay, so first, requesting and sending transcripts is not always a fast process. To get a sense of what this is like for students today, here's a quote from one of our interview participants. Quote, "Mine was kind of slow on the uptake because there's just this big wave of seniors trying to get their college or their high school transcripts transferred over to college. So we want for sending transcripts to be easier for students, especially during a pivotal milestone like their senior year." Next slide. So next, high school students invest time and effort to take community college courses with the expectation that those courses, of course, will count for credit in college. We know that this doesn't always happen reliably. For example, a student who's enrolled in such classes shared this with us. Only some credits were accepted. I wish I knew more earlier about which credits would transfer, as it would have changed the classes I took in high school and at community college. So we want high school students who receive community college credits to be able to reliably transfer those credits to their post-secondary experience. Next slide. And finally, the third quote, it's not just high school students that we have an opportunity to serve. Students who want to transfer from 2-year and 4-year colleges also face challenges. Consider this from a transfer student who shared their story with us. Quote, "I don't understand why I have to enter my transcript into every type of admission application and then still have to pay money to order transcripts to be sent. I wish the colleges had better technology to transmit this information to each other instead of me doing data entry for the schools." Okay, next slide. In summary, the partnership between C2C and eTranscript presents us with several opportunities to build a better experience for students in high school and community colleges. For high school students, imagine improving transfer requests by making them faster and more accurate, and imagine delivering on the promise to students that the effort that they made to take community college courses won't get lost in their post-secondary journey. And for community college students, imagine a streamlined way to send transcripts as they plan their transfer to their next post-secondary institution. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Marianne, who will introduce Ben and Michael for the next section.
Thanks so much, Ryan, and thank you for providing that big picture overview. Those quotes from students are incredibly powerful ways to bring to life why we're doing this work together. So I'm definitely going to be carrying those quotes with me as we have this conversation today. I'm delighted that we have two representatives from the governor's office here today to help clarify how the work of this task force relates to the broader career education master plan. So with that, I'm delighted to welcome Ben Cheetah and Michael Wiafe.
Thanks, Marianne. Great to see everybody. If you can move over to the next slide, that'd be awesome. So I love this slide because I wrote this language and it's totally gobbledygook, right? It's like, you don't need to bother reading it. It is the usual sort of language that we write in government, and it's confusing. So let me try to distill down from a different perspective what we're actually trying to achieve here. So ignore the gobbledygook. We're not going to do press releases and just reread them. But like, let's try to think from the lived journey of ourselves. Let's do. For example, so like each of us went to high school and we're obsessed about grades and we're working on our grades and we're like, at the end, we get this document called a transcript, and then we get that over to the next set of institutions that we go to, the post-secondary institutions, and then it's, grades. And then we're like, we're given this impression that careers are all about optimizing for grades up until you're around 21 or 22. And then you pick a career that you majored in, and you're basically there for the rest of your life. Like you're on track, and it's just a matter of like kind of, running through the steps from there. We all know that that's not how real life works. That's not how it works for any of us. I'm 38 and I expect to have any number of, life transitions and existential crises that require me to, shift careers and all these things. Real life career journeys are winding, they're happenstance, they're, all these things. We have to do a much better job of setting the expectation that that's the way that our journeys are, and then building supports around that reality is really what we have to do. And so I would say that the current sort of mental, psychic, emotional impact that we put on young people is exactly counterproductive, which is to say we load people up with this idea that there's going to be one document that they have to perfect. That's all they have to worry about. Part of what we're trying to do here is, yes, absolutely, ease administrative burdens. Yes, absolutely, make our lives easier by creating efficiencies, make the individual users' lives easy. But in a lot of ways, we're trying to rethink bigger picture what we're doing in education writ large. And that's really what this career education master plan conversation is about. It's a time for us to finally have these conversations like this big one that I'm starting it with, which is, how should we talk to young people about what their careers are going to look like? Should we continue to leave them with the impression that they will lock in one role at 22 and just stick to that for the rest of their lives? Or should we be trying to create more malleable, more navigable systems? So if you don't mind, go to the next slide, because I think it's the one that actually describes really what we got to do. So we have to build the architecture, the infrastructure, I would say, to do three things. One is individuals need to know what labor market value they have, what skills they have, what they are bringing to the table. Right now, the transcripts are doing that in part. They're saying, hey, these grades are a proxy for my labor market value, and I give you these grades, and I want you to, make a guess at whether or not I'm going to be a good hire or not, basically. We could do a better job of that. And that's basically this first bullet here, which is updating our academic transcripts so that we are actually aligning it with what employers are going to ultimately be using for their hiring decisions. And that also is honest and truthful to the student, because then they know, oh, great, I'm optimizing for what the employer ultimately will want from me. So that's the first thing, is we need to make sure that we have an infrastructure for individual students and workers to know what they're bringing to the table, what labor market value they've got. The second bullet to me is the next step, which is sort of, if you know what labor market value you have to understand how it corresponds to the real world, right? So it's like, I know that I'm good at X, but that only is going to help me land a job if I know that skill X aligns to opportunity Y. And so we need to do also a better job of building these skills maps in different clusters so that we can help people point different students and families and workers to different career paths and different clusters of opportunities that they might have ahead of them. The third thing is the third bullet here, which is about navigability, right? So we have each individual California knows what labor market value they have. They know how it corresponds to the real world. We can build better tools to help those individual students and workers navigate from one to the other. What we're imagining is a radically different system that really is not centering on the 18-year-old high school student or on the 21-year-old college student, but actually trying to think holistically during our whole career journeys that goes into our 60s and 70s and beyond. How do we make sure that we are making it as easy as possible for workers to navigate to different career opportunities and towards social mobility? So next slide, please. This next slide talks about some of the other plans that are related that this eTranscript work will help. For example, dual enrollment and transfers, or with transitioning to careers. Overall, this slide is just two of many, many things that we're going to try to tackle that I'm talking about, which is trying to align everything from high school and beyond so that we are supporting all Californians navigate towards their futures. Next slide, please. And so this is why we've convened you. This is the goals for this task force. So like I said, it's about coming up with recommendations to reduce that administrative burden, to take the onus off of students in terms of navigating our systems. It is to try to figure out how our different systems are interacting with each other, how there are areas where they might be a little bit too siloed out, where there are areas where there's no intentionality, that things aren't connected up at all, and how do we start connecting things up a little bit better? And lastly, how do we make sure that we are thinking about this intentionally now? And like I said, the other virtue of us doing this as part of a master plan for career education work is this is the next 36 months of the Newsom administration. This is the next 3 years. So what we want to do is we want to have these conversations inform our future deliberations and design decisions for the next 3 years. And so with that, these conversations are so incredibly important because in many ways, what you talk about here is going to help define the logic of what we design for the next 3 years, which in turn will be what Californians and future public servants are working with for the next decades, most likely, because these things don't change that often. So with all that, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Michael Wiafe, who's my partner in the governor's office, who will talk about some of the process around the master plan and some of the work that we're doing. But I wanted to start off with, big picture. What we're just trying to do is smooth out that lived journey of the student from high school through to post-secondary, all the way through to career. We got to pave that ground. And paving that ground requires a little bit better tools and architecture, which is really what this task force is all about. So really, really appreciate your work and really, really, really appreciate this window of opportunity that we have. I'm going to hand it off to Michael.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. And really, it is a pleasure to be here with you all and kind of really exciting, I think, to kind of kick off this effort. And one of the first opportunities to be able to chat about this with, I think, in a larger room of folks, which is awesome. So I'm going to walk you through just quite a few, I think, just notable dates in the past and then some moving up into the future. Ben was kind of talking about and mentioning this kind of a large effort, and it kind of culminated and it all kicked off with the executive order that the governor signed on August 31st. And so between then and December 1st, we were really working hard to meet the first deadline. So on December 1st is when state agencies and folks in the public, institutions and others submitted written recommendations for some things that the plan should address, some work that's currently in progress, essentially getting us to helping us to think about the starting point of which this effort will begin from. From then, we actually had a meeting with the Council of Career Education in the governor's office with the governor, where folks got really excited and was able to meet with kind of the leads of the folks that were mentioned in the executive order. And then we, as many of you, I'm sure, are very aware, recently put out the January 10 budget presentation, and the governor did an incredible job, I think, of outlaying where we're currently at, but and then also talking about this career education effort and how important it is, I think, to the state and important to our thinking in education. And of course, it also included funding for some of this work, which was actually predetermined, I think, into thinking like, hey, we're going to be doing a lot of this thinking at some point. And so we were able to kind of lay in some of that groundwork previously. And on January 24th, this is a week from today, we'll be doing a public webinar. So you can check careereducation.gov.ca.gov to register and to hear more information about some of the work that we're going to be doing. And you can continuously go to that website, which will be constantly updated to have some additional information there as well. And then we're going to outlay to the public on that day, a week from today, to say, here's some of the big ideas that we're thinking through, outline some of the work that you all are going to be doing, but then be able to talk a little bit more about our public process moving forward. So between January and June, there's going to be quite a few actions, I think, that are all related to the master plan for career education. And part of that is convening this task force. So we're starting here in this space on this topic. But then between the end of February and about somewhere in April, we're going to be in regions and we're going to be engaging in conversations and talking to the public. And the innovators are on the ground doing a lot of this work. And so we're going to be convening the public and other folks on various topics that are very relevant to the executive order, and to talk through some of the ideas, but then also think through operationalizing them and implementation. Some things that are already on the table. What are some things that are already in flight? And how do we do better on the implementation side to think through how we're driving through to the end goal of improving quality of life for Californians? And so all of this work, I think, between now, happening in January and June, will culminate into a first draft of the master plan in July. And then, of course, more work will then happen additional folks through those ideas and be able to get us into a final result by the end of the year, which is extremely ambitious, but also really exciting. So just really appreciative of all of you to be here. And of course, for giving us some time to be able to talk to you about the vision. I think I'll hand it back to Marianne.
Thanks so much, Michael, and thank you, Ben. This is an opportunity for task force members now to ask any questions that you have for Ben and Michael, any comments that you'd like to share. What we'll do after this is hear more about specific use cases from Kathy and hear from the Chancellor's Office from John Hetz. But before we get to that part of the agenda, this is your opportunity. If you have any questions or comments that you'd like to share, task force members, please feel free to unmute yourself and speak. Or you can raise your hand if you'd like to, or feel free to just unmute.
I think I'll speak. I just want to, applaud everyone for coming together here for education. I'm a student at East Los Angeles. Oh, let me introduce myself. My name is Trayvon Reed. I am here on the task force from a student perspective. I guess to speak to the uniqueness that the student perspective gives for the work that we're doing here today. I just want to applaud everyone for coming together and executing this executive order that the governor has put in place that is so needed here in California. I do want to say that I myself have gone through situations and pursuing my education and trying to build myself up where my transcript has become a barrier, and the bureaucracy that comes with trying to obtain a transcript so that I can continue with my education. So eTranscript, I have looked at the software, and I have seen that it is way better than a lot of the things that are in place now at various different community colleges and other colleges that aren't, I guess, mainstream, you can say. So I just wanted to say that initially, to just applaud the work and how needed it is. And I just want to thank everybody for being here.
Thanks, Trayvon. I really appreciate. I mean, I'll tell you, one experience I had was I tried to complete my associate's degree and could not figure out how to get all my transcripts together. And it's just like, it is, we could just do a better job. And I really appreciate your voice here. It's like, I'm mindful that like at the end of the day, it's like no one student is gonna be able to represent the entire perspective of all students. But it really is critical to have a person like you with us, Trayvon, because it's sort of like it just keeps us honest, keeps us remembering what we're doing here, which is trying to serve people who are actually living our systems right now. And so just wanted to say really appreciate that and appreciate you and super excited.
Thank you, Ben. And just to tell a quick story about my experience with trying to obtain my transcript, I was introduced to higher education while incarcerated. So you can imagine once upon my release, when I continued to try to, hire my education, and I got to a certain plateau, and they told me that, we need transcripts from, whatever college that you were attending, which I think was Palo Verde at the time when I began, to get my initial courses that I took there for addiction studies, because I'm getting into social work, everybody. But when I set out to get my transcript so that I can get my prevention specialist certification, which was upcoming in the graduation, and all of the big nice that boys that I wanted to involve myself in. I thought it was going to be easy. I thought it being 2023 at the time, I thought it was just I can click here, drop down over here, input a little bit of data, and boom, it was gonna appear. And when I actually got to on the phone speaking to admissions, and they let me know everything that I had to go through and reach out to the other college, and there was paperwork and there were fees and there were a lot of different criterias and boxes that I had to check. It just kind of overwhelmed me, and it kind of like, as opposed to me having a triumphant moment, like, oh, okay, I have my prevention specialist coming on. It was like, oh man, this is more work. This is like another class I have to take in order to be able to, get this certification. So I've been doing a little bit of research, and I know that this a statewide type of thing is normal in a lot of other states where they do have a database in which they can. And I was like, California, we're always so cutting edge and so we're always on the cusp of everything. I was shocked that we didn't have a system for us. So that's just my particular experience. I'll be here kind of just, adding a little bit as I can. I'm, of course, a layman to a lot of the terminology, but Kathy has kind of tuned me up. So I'll be here with you guys listening and following along, taking notes and whatnot.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet you. And thank you for
Thank
sharing.
you.
I just want to say, I think as much as you were saying thank you to us and congratulations to us, I'm saying thank you to you for being here and for being willing to share and putting yourself through something that many folks on this call have been very accustomed to, these conversations, right? And it's new to you, and so just kind of appreciating your willingness to dive in. So thank you, Trayvon.
Thank you so much, Trayvon. We're so grateful that you're spending your time with us and that we can learn from you. I'll pause here and see if there are any other task force members who want to share any thoughts, comments, questions for Michael, for Ben. All right, going once, going twice. You'll have more opportunities to join in later in the conversation too. So this isn't your last chance. With that, thank you, Ben and Michael. It's such an honor to do this work with you and to have you championing it every step of the way. So we're very excited about that. Our next part of the agenda will be to dive into some of the key issues that are intersecting here. And let me just take a step back before we dive into this specifically. So this work on broadening the use of eTranscript California is really being addressed by 3 different complementary efforts. So one of these is the work of Cradle-to-Career. So eTranscript is mentioned in our section of the statute. We built into our 5-year plan, a time to plan to discuss with all of you and with the Chancellor's Office what a future for eTranscript can be. So we had that in our 5-year plan. That's intersecting with this planning process that Ben and Michael were describing for the new master plan for career education. And then the third part that's coming together is the California Community College Vision 2030, which the Chancellor Christian there has been communicating and rolling out. So those 3 efforts all relate to the conversations we're going to have in this task force, and they all connect together. To help bridge these efforts, we have asked Kathy Booth and her team from West Ed to facilitate this task force for us. So I am personally very grateful to have Kathy in this work. As many of you know, she led the planning process for the establishment of the Cradle-to-Career data system. And so just has a wealth of historical knowledge and collaboration with so many of you from that process. She's also West Ed and Kathy staffing the governor's office on the master plan and working very closely with Ben and with Michael on that. And she's also connected to the third aspect of this, which is supporting the Chancellor's Office, the Community College Chancellor's Office, on its adult learner initiatives. So she's just perfectly positioned to keep all 3 sets of priorities top of mind for us all. So with that, I'd like to welcome Kathy as the facilitator of this task force in future meetings, especially in today, and would like to ask her now to share some of the key issues that her team documented that can help inform our thinking. So with that, over to Kathy.
Thank you so much, Marianne. And I'm so thrilled to be with everyone here today. Go ahead to the next slide. When we talk about transcripts, it sounds really geeky. It sounds like it's an administrative procedure, and it's difficult to understand why that might be really important for how we're trying to address the problems that Ben described earlier. So for this session, we did a very brief. It's only 5 pages long. We tried to name some of those key issues that we are trying to address and how they relate to transcripts specifically. So along with that, we created a visual. And if you go ahead to the next slide, we can go to that. So again, this still looks fairly complicated, but it is beginning to explain the relationships between the different functions and processes that are used by different systems of education and training, and how we might be able to pull them together to do a better job of helping people document what they know, and then relate that both to academics and to employment. So we'll be coming back to this visual repeatedly over the course of the next several meetings, and we'll sort of focus in on one portion or another over time. But you should feel free to share this document and this visual with other folks who are just curious about how this all fits together. So next slide, please. So what I want to do is walk you through 4 key issues that we're trying to tackle through the scaling of eTranscript California and the development of a complementary career passport. So the first problem, actually the first 3 problems, all have to do with actually how we transmit information related to academic contexts. So the first of these has to do with just the fact that there's lots of different ways that people pass information when they're trying to clarify what courses someone has taken before. So what we're doing with this task force is looking at an existing tool called eTranscript California that is managed by the Community College Chancellor's Office and is actually already in broad use across the state. It has several different features that can support passing information about community college course taking between institutions. You can send transcripts, you can receive transcripts, and then there's a feature that would allow 2 institutions to bulk send a whole bunch of transcripts over. So you can imagine a scenario where CSU asks Bakersfield College, who from your college has applied, and they can send all the transcripts all at once, which sounds like exactly what Trayvon was describing, like just click here and then everything is going to go over as you would hope. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of colleges that are using that feature. And so what's happened instead, and in part because eTranscript California is an aging platform that needs some updates, is that people have started sort of spreading out and using a variety of different mechanisms to pass transcripts back and forth. And that means that if you are a community college student or a student who's taking some early college credit through dual or concurrent enrollment, is that you have to navigate a different system for requesting your transcript from every single institution that you should happen to attend. And especially because in urban areas, there's lots of community colleges and very close driving distance to each other. There's a lot of students that attend multiple institutions. And it can be very confusing for them to figure out why they're charged a certain amount of money to pass a transcript from one college, but not another. And we basically put the burden on students to figure out how to do that every single time. At the same time, we're creating a lot of problems for the receiving institution. So if you're receiving transcripts in a variety of formats from a variety of different sources, there's somebody whose job it is to sit down and look at all of those documents and make sure they conform to our California specific standards and see how that relates to accepting a student for application. And that really makes it very difficult for things to happen in a timely fashion. Another key issue that we've heard a lot about, and this was reflected in the student experience audit that Ryan presented earlier, is that high school students often don't realize that they have to separately submit their transcript for that early college credit related to their high school transcript because they're separate systems. So what may happen is that students, maybe they took their 4th year of math at the local community college to take a calculus course. They're trying to apply to CSU, and they don't realize that they have to send that to clarify how much math they've actually taken, which might be a consideration related to their acceptance or their acceptance in a STEM related major. So we need to figure out ways to take that burden off of students. And then finally, students are very unclear about whether the courses that they are taking as dual enrollment are going to apply to specific majors after they're accepted. And you also heard that in the quotes that came out of the student experience audit. So basically what happens is we just have a lot of confusion and delay when it comes to trying to get transcripts transmitted between institutions. Next slide, please. So what we're looking at are some potential strategies for how to address those problems with the scaling of eTranscript California. So one possibility is that we could actually embed that transcript request in the college admission process. We've got some precedent for this already. So through californiacolleges.edu, if a student launches their application to CSU, for example, they can just click a button that gives permission for their transcript to automatically be passed. It gets passed in a format that is exactly what CSU needs to see, and it makes the whole process so much more seamless. So we could do the same thing with eTranscript California and embed that permission option into other college application forms and make it a seamless process. The other thing that we probably need to do, especially to take into account the needs of independent colleges, is to have some sort of uniform data standard for how transcripts get transmitted. So what that means is that if for some reason you're going to be using a different platform, we still have the ability to make sure the information is passing in the same manner and that it can be aggregated across different sources over time as needed. So that's our first issue. Moving on to our second issue, we have an issue related to getting accurate transcript information into some wonderful tools that have been developed in the state to support advising for students. So in recent years, we've seen a real surge in the number of K-12 districts that are using CaliforniaColleges.edu, which has this wonderful feature where, in a very simple visual, a student or a counselor working with a student or their family can see whether they've taken the A to G courses they need to be eligible for CSU and UC. But unfortunately, like the example I just gave, if you took your calculus class somewhere else and there's no way that that's represented in the tools presented by CaliforniaColleges.edu, the student's not getting accurate information about whether they're on track to be able to apply where they want to. We also have a brand new tool that's been released by CSU called the CSU Transfer Planner, which helps demystify the process for community college students in figuring out whether the courses they've taken make them eligible for transfer to specific CSU campuses in specific majors. So we have a whole database called Assist, which just documents all of these articulation agreements, but it can be very confusing for a student and even sometimes for counselors to have up-to-date information on whether the student is eligible to go to a particular place. So the CSU Transfer Planner leverages that Assist database so that a student can go in and see, they sort of pick all the classes from Assist that they've taken, and then it'll say, oh, you were actually already eligible to transfer to this particular CSU in this particular major, which is so helpful for students to figure out what they need to do. But if we could integrate eTranscript California with CSU Transfer Planner, a student wouldn't have to pick the courses and risk picking the wrong course by mistake, and we could just show students, based on what they've taken, where they are in their transfer pathway, which would free up a lot of time for counselors to spend time working with students to address other issues that are important when they're planning for their transfer. Next slide. So that is the strategy that we're coming up with, which is this idea that we could do this integration. And we already have sort of excited endorsements from both CaliforniaColleges.edu and the CSU Transfer Planner team that they would love to have this integration happen to make those tools more effective. Let's go on to issue 3. And this is where we start to get to this challenge that, you know, sometimes when you're in high school, you take a dual or concurrent enrollment course and you are advancing on your college career. But there is a lot of folks who don't go that route, and they may not engage in going into post-secondary until well into their 20s or even later. So one of our challenges here is about economic structures in the state. So if you are to look at what jobs there are in the state that offer a living wage, an overwhelming percentage of those jobs require a bachelor's degree. But unfortunately, only a third of the adults in California have a bachelor's degree or higher. And if you look at communities of color, you see disproportionately that they have no post-secondary credentials at all, meaning no certificate or associate degree, let alone a bachelor's. And so what we're seeing is a reinforcement of inequity, where if people can't get into college right away, it becomes very, very difficult for them to be able to ever get back on track to get the bachelor's degree that might lead to the more stable and sustainable job. However, we know that there's lots of ways that people are building skills that are relevant both for jobs and for academic degrees. We just don't have a good way to document that learning. This is something the community colleges are working actively on. That's what the MAP project is trying to solve for. But I want to give you just 3 very specific examples that you could bear in mind as we're thinking about the problems we're trying to solve. So, as you know, we have very, very deep shortages in the state for teachers, especially the pre-K teachers needed for universal pre-K. We don't have enough nurses, and we are beginning to do a lot more in advanced manufacturing, and we don't necessarily have the folks that are trained up for those jobs. So you can imagine someone who's an experienced home daycare provider who maybe took some early childhood classes in an adult school and could be a good candidate to become a preschool teacher, but her credits are not going to transfer right now from non-credit into a bachelor's degree pathway. And how could we figure out how to solve that problem? Or another example could be a veteran. So there's someone who is a field medic who may have incredible skills related to allied health, where we would want to make sure that that person is accelerated into a nursing program, but we have to figure out a way to document the relationship of what you know as a field medic compared to what you would need to know as an EMT or as a nurse. And finally, you know, in the Central Valley, we have all sorts of people who have only high school diplomas, who've been working for years in drilling in the oil industry, who really understand how to look at complex simulation and visualization tools, who are losing their jobs right now. And they might be incredible candidates for mechatronics if we could find a way to document what they already know how to do and advance them toward the bachelor's degree that they need for the new types of jobs. So if those are our problems, in the next slide, we'll talk about some potential solutions. So one idea is that we could come up with a mechanism that we use to evaluate equivalencies between learning that happens in contexts like non-credit or in the military or on the job, or third-party credentials is another possibility. And some body of discipline experts could determine how that is equivalent to academic coursework. And then you could use eTranscript California to actually document those experiences. So if, for example, because the military has very clear documentation about the skills that you would have as a field medic, we had a disciplinary body say, yes, if you have these particular military credentials, we are going to certify that you've completed these, 4 community college classes. You could have eTranscript California then document that skill set, document those academic credits, and then you're able to move that person seamlessly when you're trying to do credit for prior learning. And that brings us to the fourth problem, and that is documenting learning for employment. And this is a place where Westhead's had a very interesting journey as we've been documenting possibilities in this space. So there is a tremendous amount of excitement out there about the possibility of removing the bachelor's degree as the singular credential that gets you to living wage work. So we're hearing lots about skills-based hiring. We're seeing states like California's already done this, and now a bunch of other states are removing bachelor's degrees as necessary requirements for jobs. But it turned out that when we really dug into what was happening in other states and how far things were, skills-based hiring is still in its infancy, because it essentially requires a whole-scale change to how an HR department evaluates information. So we pulled this quote from the Society for Human Resources Management because I thought it just sort of encapsulated this mental shift that's required before this is going to happen at scale. So basically you have to go from saying, oh, this person is not qualified as your default way of thinking into these people are likely to be qualified, and then looking at a variety of different mechanisms to show that they are skilled to do the work. So this is going to affect all sorts of things. It changes the roles that people play when they're doing the hiring. It would change the way people write their job ads. It would change the evaluation process. It probably also changes how you manage performance and even develop employees within institutions. And so this is not something where we're really clear how a technology solution is going to address problems with the same clarity that we have for those academic cases. So go to the next slide. So what we do think we could do is, as a very first step, there are a lot of employers who are now looking at particular types of digital data. So it might be like an industry certification or a badge that could be incorporated and then used both for competency-based education or credit for prior learning in the college setting, but could also be then passed on to employers as a way to begin to evaluate competencies. We can also look at models for ways that workers could curate related information for employers, figure out what it is about their experience that would be most valuable, especially if we're working with employers to understand what they want to see. And this is where we're hearing from other states that it's often a sector-based strategy. So clearly in a highly regulated field like allied health, you're going to evaluate learning really differently than you would in the IT field, which is a long history of using skills tests to be able to figure out who's ready for jobs, because often IT is moving faster than academia. So we can figure some of that out as a first step. Next slide. So related to that, what I wanted to do was just talk through 3 ways that the work of this task force and its recommendations related to the master plan can fit into other efforts that are happening in other places. So the first is this concept called the Learning and Employment Record, or LER. And that is the name that people around the country are using to try to think of a way to have a transcript work both for academics and for employers. So a bunch of states are further along than California on this. And what they describe are these 4 things that you need to have to be successful. So basically, you have to have lots of systems talking to each other to make sure that competency-based education is accepted. So the idea that if a discipline body says that, yes, this field medic work counts for this academic credit, that it's accepted across multiple different types of education providers. It also means that we have to pull in workforce-related organizations that may have a lot of skills training-related resources and figuring out how to get them engaged in the process. Then you have to engage employers to do all the work we just talked about related to recruitment and hiring. And then you really have to figure out how you're going to get that tech platform in place that allows this information to pass back and forth. So when we looked at all of this, we realized that putting all of the burden on eTranscript California is unreasonable. There's no way that this platform can do all of these different things, but we can use it to fill some of the requirements and then identify what more we could do through a different tool like the Career Passport. The next place that we can do some alignment has to do with this concept of establishing equivalencies. So some of you may have been following the work of the AB 928 task force, which was looking at ways to improve transfer outcomes. And this task force had representatives from a variety of different academic institutions, so community colleges, CSU, UC, our K-12 partners at CDE, the independent colleges, students, as well as equity and social justice organizations. And two of their recommendations are directly related to what we're doing here today. So they said it would be a good idea to have that discipline-specific body that would do intersegmental course articulation and pathway development. So we could actually be taking that recommendation and taking that ball a little bit down the field about how we could make that happen. And secondly, they were focusing on the idea that you could use Cradle-to-Career as a mechanism for this. And because eTranscript California's scaling is under the umbrella of the suite of tools being shepherded through C2C, we have some really interesting ways to act on those recommendations immediately. And that takes us to our final slide here, which is we can use this to align efforts for the Career Education Master Plan. So as you heard earlier from Michael, there were a number of agencies that submitted written recommendations in December about what they would hope that the master plan would address. So I'm pulling three things that are directly related to the scope we're describing here. So both community colleges and CDE thought that it would be important for those dual and concurrent enrollment or competency-based experiences that are documented in conjunction with community colleges be accepted by four-year institutions. We heard from the community colleges, the Department of Rehabilitation, the Labor Agency, and from UC that it would be a great idea to provide course credit for things like pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship. So that gets to that idea of us pulling learning in non-traditional contexts into the actual transcript. And finally, I think just about everybody, so community colleges, CDE, CSU, Department of Rehabilitation, GoBiz, the Labor Agency, and UC, all thought that it would be important to recognize learning from non-academic contexts like job experiences, third-party credentials, and non-credit courses. And that's exactly what we can figure out how to do with this task force. So I've been talking for a very long time. I appreciate your patience, but I thought it was important for us to sort of take a close look at what the problems we're trying to solve and then how this might relate to other priorities. So I'd like to pause for a moment and just see if we have any questions or comments or discussion points from anyone on the task force.
And Marianne, Kathy, if you don't mind me going, saying the learning and employment tool is very important, I believe, because I do a lot of nonprofit work. I work for a nonprofit. We do social work. I help house the homeless here in Los Angeles. And it requires for someone coming in with just the lived experience piece, not as much education, to do a lot of training. Everyone has to do a lot of training there, regardless. But I just say that to say that a lot of the training that we do, it doesn't go, it goes unnoticed, I can say. And it's not something that I can carry with me or something that can translate to academia for me if I have to go back to school and probably try to further my education so I can, become get a bachelor's or a master's or so on and so forth. So I believe the implementation of that, that cross segmental is very important. And the fact that it's been acknowledged and it's being acknowledged and worked on, I feel like it's very important, just for the ordinary person, the ordinary working Joe that, didn't initially start it off with education in mind, just, was trying to be gainfully employed. But through, working at a place where you got some training, maybe you can take that back to school. Like, and there's a lot of different trainings that trauma-informed care is like the most base model one that you have to take if you're coming into social work. And it's something that should translate, I feel like, back to school is some type of learning or some type of, non-credit or credit or, some type of acknowledgement there for a person that has gone through that training. So anywhere where we can kind of bridge that gap between the workforce with this new group, new tranche of employees with the lived experience crew. You know, I represent them as well. Anywhere we can kind of bridge that, I believe that would just drive up admission, drive up higher learning for everyone.
I know that Abby Snag, who works for the labor agency, has done a lot of work with nonprofits as well. And I think that it's important for us to be looking at, we often think of academics, we think about maybe industry certifications, but thinking of nonprofits as another venue where some of this happens is an important way for us to open up our thinking about what should be included in the effort. Are there other questions or comments? All right, well, hearing none, I'll pass it back to Marianne.
Thank you, Kathy. And thank you for walking us through all of the different potential problems to solve and ways to start thinking about that. Really appreciate it. We'll next be hearing from John Hetz. He is the Executive Vice Chancellor of the Office of Innovation, Data, Evidence, and Analytics at the Community College Chancellor's Office. He also serves on behalf of the Chancellor on the Cradle-to-Career Governing Board. So he'll now give an overview to help clarify how scaling eTranscript California fits into the California Community College's Chancellor's Office Vision 2030. So thank you, John.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, everyone. So just a little bit of background about me. I came from the upper Midwest and spent a lot of time there, moved out to California as a young adult. And I have to say my expectations for California map onto Javon's perfectly. Like I just expected California to be this technological, like, you know, paradise where things were solved with technology that the rest of us couldn't comprehend. I too have shared in some of the disillusion in finding how even challenging that can be in California. I'm here to talk on behalf of the California Community Colleges and the work we've been doing. Chancellor Christian has really set for us as a system a goal for us to reimagine ourselves and to think carefully about how we take systems that exist and leverage them or build new systems so that we as institutions are taking the burdens off of students, right? That we are taking those burdens and making them go away and taking the types of things that Ryan shared with all of you earlier and making them disappear, making them a thing of the past. Because those are all problems that exist because we don't do the appropriate technological communication with each other, right? Those are all enormously solvable problems. They're complex, enormously solvable problems, but enormously solvable problems. And so one of the things I want to make sure to do is, you know, we're going to be talking about a lot of, you know, nerdy technical details and process details. And I want to make sure that all of you feel the appropriate level of excitement for what this represents for students in California and for all Californians, really. Because it's going to be a complicated journey. We don't know where it's going to end up, but I feel a lot like, for those of you who might remember, there was an old movie called The Shawshank Redemption. And at the end of that journey, there's this moment where someone takes a chance and talks about how exciting it is in that moment that you can barely sit still or hold a thought in your head. And it's the excitement only that those, like, taking that opportunity really holds for you. Even when the journey and its conclusion may be uncertain, I think the opportunity for us here as a state is enormous. So I want to talk a little bit about, and I think Kathy shared a little bit about where we've been in the past and where we're hoping to go with these new benefits. Thank you. And so one of the things that we're hoping for is to really think about how we create a unified transcript for all the students in our system and all the students who come to our system over time, right? That captures all the types of things we've been talking about: credit for prior learning, competency-based education, contract education, where we're doing education on behalf of employers, but then that's not transcripted in any way, that captures apprenticeships, non-credit, that makes sure that we are getting the full gamut of what skills that students are developing wherever they're developing them, and making sure that those things become real and documented and usable and that continue with students throughout their life. It's absolutely a critical priority for us. And so we're really excited about the opportunity to work with the state to modernize this platform and get all of our colleges to participate fully in it. And so you can see there, the goal here is to make this something that is, we have complete participation across our system, that everyone participates, that it's free for students, so that all of this documentation exists and lives for students, not for institutions alone. One of the really important things, I think you heard a little bit about it today, where some of the real barriers are, and in terms of where our state is going, our state is really building out dual enrollment as an opportunity to improve student outcomes, both in K-12 and beyond. And our system is leaning very heavily into that. And so making sure that those opportunities are both captured for the students when they're in their system, but that they're also getting the fair credit in K-12 for doing that work is absolutely essential. One of the things I've worked on in a variety of contexts over time is making sure that students get fair credit for the work that they've done. And anytime that we're not doing that, we are failing as a state. And this is really an opportunity for us to think about how we make sure to do that. And one really powerful way to do that is to make sure that when students are moving to a new institution, when they're applying somewhere, right, that information goes with them automatically. Right, that the student doesn't have to do it, doesn't have to go back and claw back information from 3 or 4 different institutions and make sure that it all gets there in time. We should be able to handle that as a state. And so there's really powerful opportunities for us to take the transcripted information that students have, integrate it immediately into college applications so that that information flows with the student automatically. Obviously, you still have to maintain the opportunity for students to request transcripts and include them, working with independent and out-of-state colleges, because we're going to have students that are coming from all over the country to come to California. Hopefully, the better we build things, the more students will come to us here in California. And there are real opportunities then to integrate this with existing tools, right? So to integrate all of this information with the CSU planner, to integrate it with the program pathways mapper that we have in the California community colleges, so that this information can be used not only to help students move on to the next thing and get access to the employment opportunities that they deserve, but it also allows them to visualize what they've done and have better plans for where they want to go. One of the things, obviously, that we want to do, Kathy referenced this early, is make sure that it's tightly integrated with Assist and takes advantage of all the information about articulation that there is there. I think there's also opportunities for us to think about that as we do this work, how we improve Assist as well, right? Like, I think one of the things that things like AB 928, which was talked about earlier, but also our common course numbering work in the California Community Colleges, AB 1111, allows us to start to ask real questions about where there are weird differences and whether or not courses articulate or not. And so there's this real powerful opportunity for us to think carefully and really make all of this work for students in a way that's seamless and easy and doesn't force them to require someone with a PhD to help them through the process. And then what we really hope to do is to build this on a set of interoperable standards, right? That creates consistency and interoperability between our transcripts and K-12 transcripts, so that dual enrollment data, community college data, all of that can move seamlessly between systems, can be compiled when students are in those different systems, and that if other colleges want to use this information, they have a consistent standard against which they can use it. And so I can't express enough what powerful opportunities we have here before us. I really appreciate the fact that the state is leaning into this and really thinking about how we can move all of this forward for all of us. I do think that leaves some things for us to think about as we move forward. One of the things that we're going to have to think about is how we, review, document, think about equivalency between credit courses and eventually equivalency between competencies. Like, how do we make sure that we have the appropriate mechanisms so that, whether or not students have developed a skill in credit courses, non-credit, contract ed, adult education, other classes in for-profit or nonprofit spaces, that they've developed third-party credentials, that all of that stuff can be captured, reviewed, and then documented for students. If we have that, if we have a process that builds that out, builds that mechanism out, then we can maintain and document all these equivalencies and competencies for students and keep them all in one place together. Once you have that, that allows us to have things that would certify learning. It'd be treated fairly, so we could capture things like credit for prior learning better, and then translate it into incorporation into eTranscript. And that way we could potentially allow a broad curated set of skills, competencies, courses, certificates, degrees, all of those things to employers, and hopefully work with employers to think carefully about the types of things that Ben was talking about, right? Like really get a sense of how they think about the skills that they need, how they document those skills, and so that we can build out for students the opportunities they need to get the skills that get them those high-paying, high-wage jobs that allow them to support their families. And so this is just, I think, one piece of a larger puzzle, but it's a really important piece that allows the state to move forward in a thoughtful and meaningful way, and that really solves some very painful problems that exist at these seams between students' educational and career experiences, and that allows those seams to potentially, if not go away, become far, far easier for them to traverse. And so I hope all of you can, think about how we embrace this opportunity with excitement. And there's always going to be real challenges for this work. But I think if we approach it from the opportunity that it presents us, the meaningful chance that we have to change things on the ground for students and relatively quickly is quite substantial. So that's, I think, just a quick overview of where we stand as a system. We're very excited about this possibility and what it could mean. I'm happy to take questions that people might have about where we're hoping to go, but I think you've heard a lot about both the problems that we're trying to solve as a state that eTranscript can help contribute to solving, and some of what the solutions might look like.
Thank you so much, John. It's really great to hear the excitement and enthusiasm for the moment that we have here and what we can potentially do together. So really appreciated hearing your perspective from the Chancellor's Office side. Would really welcome, task force members. This is a moment where if there's something you'd like to share on, questions for John, or how any connection points you see with your work in your agency or department from the map, the visual there that John was walking through, please feel free to share that, or just, broader questions and comments as well. Thank you, John.
I did have one question. John, on yours, proposed activity slide, the first one, you had transcript request option. I just wanted to make sure that that was inclusive of batch transcript requests from other institutions.
I think that's probably one of the big things that we'd have to make sure to do, is to think carefully about how we allowed both institutions and students to take advantage of this opportunity.
Because part of the challenge that we have right now is there is the batch option, but a lot of schools will not allow us to use the batch option because of the transcript fees. So it's something that we've talked about for years in the eTranscript California Steering Committee. So I just think it would be helpful for us to be mindful of that as we think through this process moving forward.
I think that's absolutely on point. One of the things that we've talked a lot about is how we use this as an opportunity to think about how we move away from making transcripts a fee-based activity for students. That creates a real disproportionate barrier for some of our students, even though there's always some kind of mechanism for students to get that waived. That's one of those things that ends up being a government by burden or regulation by burden types of situations, especially for low-income students or students who are first generation who don't know how to navigate those types of things. And so there's an opportunity here for us to address that barrier head on as a state.
I think it would also be important to make sure that it's not just the transcript fee, but any third-party agencies that colleges are working with, because one of the things that we've experienced is that a student requesting an electronic transcript is actually paying more because the community college is using an intermediary to send that data. So that's also one of the pieces that I think needs to be addressed, hopefully either in the technical architecture or just in the rules as we move forward, that cost can't be passed on to the student.
I think that's exactly right, April.
Thank you, John.
Our goal is I think the SAT word for it is to disintermediate that process.
Great, thank you.
Jacob. Oh, you're still on. Okay.
Thank you. I hit the button, but for some reason it didn't change. Thank you. It's Jake Johnson with Department of Rehabilitation. I'm just really excited about this as a former community college, California community college student, and sort of lifelong IT person, and then having I'm blind, so being a person with a disability. Anything we can do to make the process easier and more streamlined, I think there's just tremendous value. So just grateful to be part of this effort, and really looking forward to digging in and helping wherever there are considerations around accessible design. I also like to just take a quick opportunity to support and extend the comments that Trevon, that you were making a few moments ago about just the value in counting some of this, the other work that people are doing, and the activity that they're engaging in to increase their skill sets. Kathy, as you mentioned, in IT, we've been doing this for a long time, right? We really look at sort of what the person can do and what they're bringing to the table, whether it's their degree or, work that they did for their church, or, some community work that they've done, or whatever it is. So it just really, it feels like I'm very new to this effort, and I feel like I'm in the right place. So thank you.
Thank you so much for those comments, Jacob. Really appreciate it. And appreciate how you're connecting the dots for us on that. Any other questions for John, or comments more broadly? Okay, well, thank you so much, John. Really appreciated your sharing the plans that the Chancellor's Office has for all of this work. With that, I believe we're ready to invite public comment. If you're a member of the public and you're listening in, please feel free now to go to public comment. Rajil, do we have anyone raising their hands on Zoom?
At the moment, there is no one raising their hand for public comment.
Okay, so we'll wait just another minute. The raise hand function is at the bottom of the screen if anyone would like to share. Okay, I think we can move on to the next section. So we're going to close out with Kathy walking us through a group discussion, looking ahead to the next few meetings and what needs to be addressed in this planning process. So I'll turn it over to Kathy to wrap things up.
Thank you. It'd be great if we took off the spotlight so we could see everybody. I realize this has been a presentation of like a lot of people talking out, and I really appreciate Trayvon for starting us out, modeling, sort of sharing our experiences. So I guess this is my question for you all. This is this incredible opportunity that we have through the master plan to put forward some bold ideas. And clearly the things that were outlined, as John especially walked you through exactly how this would be sort of split between what happens in eTranscript California and what might be done through the career passport. I'm wondering if we missed anything. As you look at this set of options, are there other ways that you could imagine that we could help to document ways to basically document learning and get that exchanged between our institutions in ways that help people advance in both college and career? So I know that, John, you mentioned, for example, Program Pathways Mapper as another advising tool that could potentially be linked with this. Can you maybe give some thoughts about what that might look like?
Well, I mean, so one of the obvious possibilities is once you create an interoperability standard that allows for the pulling in of information from all the institutions at once, right? That creates a much broader foundation to build a plan. Just to put one of the challenges that we have as a system out there, our students often, it takes us some time for us to get information from other institutions and incorporate them into their educational plan. We don't quite have the same level of support that we can provide at the student intake process. And so having the opportunity for students to have all that information come with them and be built into a planning tool like Program Pathways Mapper or the CSU Planner or whatever it might be really helps our students a ton at the beginning. I think one of the things that I've learned powerfully from a lot of research across many different areas in community college education is that starting point matters a lot. And if students can't take the momentum they've already built and keep moving forward, especially in the community college space, we lose them. And a lot of them will come back eventually, but that's not what we want. We want them to be able to reach their educational goals, with some degree of early success. Because one of the things about early success is it leads to later success, right? And it leads to people enjoying education and wanting more of it. It building out a process that feels to students like they are being welcomed and not gate kept, I think is this powerful opportunity. And using this type of new moment to essentially feed into that, to feed into the planning tools that are already available and make them even more powerful, I think is something that we don't want to miss.
Abby, I see your hand is raised.
Sure, thanks, Kathy. I think this is all incredibly exciting and just love the potential for aligning systems, for easing the burden on students, for enabling students and workers to really accelerate their careers by getting the skills they learn on the job, whether it's through an apprenticeship or internship or just a job, recognized. I'm nervous about the piece of this that will be a career passport that has value to employers, and want to make sure that through this process, and I'm really committed to working on this, that we just vet these concepts, the tools, and test this with different kinds of employers in different kinds of settings, different kinds of hiring practices, because this is only as valuable and useful to students as workers as it is useful and valued by employers.
Are there particular connection points that you think we should be making as we're engaging employers about those discussions, or especially if we're taking a sector-based approach like some other states have done?
I'm not familiar with other states. Would be happy to do some research on that. I know my go-to on credit for prior learning is always Kale. I don't know how much they have done with a career passport notion, but happy to look into it. I think we should just figure out the number of employers we want to test this with, identify sectors, identify large and small employers in different regions, and just go for it, including some of the institutions represented here, and public sector jobs. Would CalHR value a career passport, or would students, would applicants still have to enter everything on their own? So I think we just have to do some reality testing. I'm happy to work on it.
We have a research team that's been already speaking to other states, so I'll have them follow up with you, Abby, to look for options. Thank you. Great. Carrie.
Hi, Carrie Stewart from the UC Office of the President. John, you succeeded in getting me more excited about this. I was already excited, and anything that we can do to reduce burden on students. We're all behind so much of what we do in higher education. Sometimes, perhaps inadvertently, is make things easy on ourselves and to the detriment of the students. So very excited about the work and working with the task force. I just wanted to follow on about the program Pathways Mapper, which I'm a big fan of, and it's something that we're trying to expand those pathways between community colleges and UC. And in conversations with the Accelerating Transfer Institute at Aspen Institute, they have talked about trying to build more career development opportunities into the program Pathways Mapper. So you're not only looking at 4 years, 2 years at the community college, along with 2 years at a baccalaureate degree granting institution, but you're also looking at things like internships. And I see, Jackie, opportunities with California Volunteers to build those things in so that students have an opportunity to avail themselves of those types of things that will help them move forward in their careers. So just something to be thinking about how we might integrate that as we have these discussions.
Great. Trayvon.
So yes, I have my hand up again. But I did want to kind of implore to you guys about the industry that I work in, and maybe something that might have just kind of fell by the wayside, just kind of because it's kind of adjacent from education. And I would say it's the homeless sector where I work, and there's a lot of lived experience folks getting hired there. There's a lot of money, especially here in California, if we will acknowledge that policymakers are running on homelessness, right, every time around. And so all of these, whether it be Measure H or Measure J or American Rescue Funds, are being pumped into, Los Angeles, the county, and California wide to create programs for these individuals to become self-sustainable and to become housed, right? But with all of that programs and also funds being pumped in, you create a tunnel or like another pathway for a career. They have a database called HMIS. I'm not sure if anyone here is familiar with HMIS, but it's the Homeless Management Information System. And most organizations and most people that serve the homeless population have to be in some way, shape, form, or fashion integrated with this software, with this database. The database is really purely to collect data and, maybe do referrals or, mental health or food or what do they call it? Supportive services and things of that nature for the clients. And all of that is good and well and great and awesome. But I implore to the policymakers, because there is no such training nowhere in California where you can go to an institution of higher education and be trained in this database. You would have to get a job at some place that uses this database. And then there's just, a series of videos or whatnot that you would watch to get your credentials. And it's such a dense database that you can't really, become as well versed as you need as a service provider to, just get your credentials and hit the ground running. So I implore to you guys, anybody that can make policy or anybody that's a policymaker here, HMIS training is needed across the board, because there will be plenty of people being hired in this sector, and most of them will be coming from the lived experience, because we're the ones who can seamlessly communicate and seamlessly empathize with that particular client. So it's a really huge thing. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know if the eTranscript meeting was the right meeting to kind of voice this, but why it was fresh on my mind, and we have the Chancellor's office here, I wanted to kind of mention it.
Well, I appreciate that on so many different levels. Let me say a couple of things. You really meaningfully captured one of the real pushes behind why we need to think about documenting people's skills and competencies. And that is to give people fair credit for the skills and competencies that they have and not force them to have to demonstrate it over and over again. There's a gentleman by the name of Mike Rose that talked about the dignity of these skills and did for a very long time, and how the folks of us in these types of spaces tend to not fairly recognize the meaningfulness and dignity of that work. And so this is a real opportunity for us to course correct on that and capture that. The other thing that I would lean into is one of the things that this does, potentially, right? The bigger, the overall arching project, when we get to thinking about what Career Passport does, is it'll also help all of us who provide training to better understand where those skills that people are asking for are, right? And so really thinking about both on the employer side and the people who are trying to develop skills that they want, how we can really capture that information in a meaningful way. And that then translates into things that we can do at our institutions to help better provide that. And so I think really appreciate so deeply what you've shared. The Chancellor's Office, our system really works hard to try and provide those opportunities. It's a core part of our competency-based education push, but we have a long way to go.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, I know we're basically at time. So I just want to do sort of a pitch for what we're going to do in our next meeting. So in February, we're going to be talking about the specific issues about sharing information about dual and concurrent enrollment and how information could be integrated into the various application forms for the state. So what we'll do is we'll sort of really lay out some very tangible actions that could be taken along that front and talk it through together about what it is that we know about what's happening right now. What could we already say, hey, this is rolling, let's just document it, where there's places where you think there's actions that might take a little bit more time that we want to create a specific recommendation for to go into the Career Education Master Plan. So again, we're going to take this piecemeal because today was so much content, and we're just going to really focus on each of the upcoming meetings about documenting what we're already doing and what we would like to do and where we think more effort is needed. So there will be a pre-reading for that. Again, we're going to keep the pre-reads really short. They're also designed to make this a talking point that you can share with your constituencies so they're aware of the work that's underway here and bring forward any concerns that are specific to the folks that you represent. So any final questions or comments? All right, well, Marianne, do you want to close us out then?
I'm happy to. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you to you and your team who've been such great partners on this work with us here at Cradle-to-Career. Another huge thanks to John Hetz. It's been wonderful to be on this journey together with the Chancellor's Office, and we're just so excited, really excited to be beginning this conversation together. I'm excited for what the next task force meetings will bring, and I'm just so grateful that you're dedicating your time and attention to this important work. So thank you so much. Thank you to the public who listened in, and we will see you in about a month's time. Thank you.